so I moved here for love. And I worked at an advertising agency for about a year. That was, didn't work out that well, and I left, and I thought I would just consult and do, help people design their business and things like that. And I was actually doing a session in Columbus, Ohio, and I took them, because I thought maybe I should make a makerspace here in Louisville. And I went to visit one that was in Columbus, and I did a session there for a friend of mine. And I was driving home from that session, and I was like, instead of like just making a makerspace, why don't I do something that has to do with what I love to do? What if I made a fashion makerspace, like a place where you had sewing machines and dress forms and tables, and people can use them and learn about the product and talk to other people who've made products and get ideas and resources of how to get their product out the door. Because I had tried to do a line of clothing a few years back, and it was so difficult. And if I could have had a space where other people, were working, and I could make things and I could do things, it would have been so much easier. So that was my mission, and I started doing it about May last year. And what I had to do was try to find designers who were doing that here. So I found like 30 designers. Actually, there's a lot here that people do, and we don't know about them, which is interesting, but they don't have a platform to show their products. So I did a fashion show in October and had 300 people, 400 people go to the fashion show. And that's when I thought, okay, I have to keep doing this. And then I had another fashion show in April, and I did a Kickstarter, and I got funded. And so I bought sewing machines, and now I have a space. And I'm working on 3 fashion shows coming up in the next few months. And so that's kind of what I do. I do classes. We do classes in fashion, so we do kind of like, how to learn how to sew or learn how to make things with leather. We also do some classes to make your business better. So like social media, we're doing a YouTube class in August. And so we're trying to give the skills to people so they can learn other skills, or they can get better at something that you want to make in the future. It's become like a mission for me now, because sewing is a dying trade. Not a lot of people can sew, and not a lot of people want to learn how to sew. So and there's a lot of need for people to sew. There's a lot of companies that need sewers, and so we think that there's an opportunity there to train, and then maybe if people want to design their own products, that they could have, a place to be in-house there. So that is what I'm doing now. Do you guys have any questions? Yes.
What kind of problems did you face when you were building your makerspace?
Oh my God, every single problem. It's a really, so I used to work in the corporate world, and when you work at a place, you just go to work and do your job, right? You go to work, do your job, you get, benefits, you don't have to worry about anything. But when you have your own business and you're an entrepreneur, you have to do everything. You have to clean your space. You have to, make all the copy. I do all my own design work. I manage the website. I do all the social media. I have meetings with a lot of people every time. And and there's days that when I was doing the Kickstarter, I had 50% I needed 50% of the money still, like 2 days before it ended. And I was like, oh my God, am I gonna make this? And by a miracle, somebody came and said, well, I wanna buy this, and I got the money. So sometimes you're like, am I doing the right thing? Like, I wasn't sure that I was doing the right path, but things keep showing me, and people keep, you know, coming and asking, so it feels like I'm doing the right thing, but you always run into difficulties, you know, like I was trying to do the insurance, and then they wanted to call me manufacturing. I'm like, I'm not a manufacturer. I just have sewing machines for people to use. So, you know, things like that, just things that you wouldn't imagine. And then you're trying to buy a sewing machine, and everything has to do with one other thing that you need, that you have to do, that you're gonna have to go do. And because you're doing it all by yourself, you kinda, you know, you work all the time, all weekend, you know, all the time on trying to get your business out, because it doesn't happen from one day to another, you know, it kinda, you know, takes time to get the people to know what you're doing, who you are, who to come to, and it's a lot of work, you know. Sometimes I feel like I might be a coach for somebody, helping them get their business off the ground, and, you know, spending some time with them and helping them on their business, because I think that way, so I can, you know, even though I can give them ideas and how to think about their ideas differently. So every day there's, you know, one day I might say, okay, this is not working, and then I get a big break the next day, and somebody wants to do, like yesterday, somebody said, I want to host a fashion show. Great! And, you know, this person knows a lot of people, so it just helps the brand and the people working on it. So yes, there's challenges every day when you have your own business.
How many advertising agencies have you worked at, and what were some of them?
So, the one I worked at here was called, well, it was called Creative Alliance, now it was Scopecchio. But Debbie Scopecchio founded the agency. She actually died last week, which is very sad, because she did a lot of things for Louisville. But I actually, I didn't work at, but I worked with, when I was at P&G, with Saatchi & Saatchi, and a lot of the bigger agencies in New York. So I got to go to a few agencies in New York and work with them, you know, because I led the brand identity for Crest globally. And Crest is in many countries around the world, and it's not called Crest everywhere. It has different names. And so we would meet once a month to talk about what are the other countries doing, are we consistent? Because one of the things you want to be as a brand is consistency around the world, you know, because then people recognize you if you're consistent. So that was kind of one of the things we wanted to manage. So we met every 6 months and reviewed all the advertising materials to make sure all the countries were on track on being consistent.
Did you face any educational hardships while you were taking lessons in this way?
Yes, good question. So, so my parents never really, you know, they weren't really like on me, because I was pretty determined to get A's in every class. But it was hard when we moved from country to country, because actually when we came to the U.S., it was easy. The U.S. didn't require anything. If you said you were in 3rd grade, they would take your, you know, they're like, okay, she's in 3rd grade. Go, move on, she's in 3rd grade. But like in the U.S., I mean in Venezuela, they would look at all the classes you took, because you have to take certain classes. And so the classes that you didn't take, you had to take those, test for those, plus the grade that you were going into. So I was in like 9th grade taking 6 classes from 8th grade and I had to take tests for all those classes. So to graduate, I would, you know, so the first time that happened, I was like, so I had, you know, I would study, and then I'd take the test. I barely even passed those tests because there were so hard, you know, you have to study on your own for a month, and then you have to take a test that was, you know, they would do for a year. And then when I came back the second time, I got smarter. So I took Spanish in the US, which was like so easy. And then they when I came back, they would transfer it for Castellano, which was Spanish, because it had the same translation, but they didn't know the coursework. But because it had the same translation, so I took the really hard ones in the US. I got really smart. I took the hard ones like chemistry, because nobody could, my dad knew physics and math, but he didn't know chemistry. So I took chemistry, so when I came back to Venezuela, I wouldn't have to take chemistry. You know, so I was smarter the second time around. But yes, it was very, I mean, especially in education, it was really hard when you move country to country. And, you know, even your social life, you have different friends, and it's hard to get to know people when you're like leaving. I really got angry at my parents at one point, because we were just moving so much and around different countries. But now I so thank them, because it made me a person with more, I can adapt to change faster. I'm more flexible with people, and it's opened up my love for different cultures. Did I answer your question?
Yes. Okay, so like right now, if you ever get like, when you're working on your business, if you ever get like overwhelmed or like frustrated or angry, what do you do to like calm down?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's ups and downs when you're starting a new business, because you're not always, you know, where you would like to be. And so what I usually do is I've started to exercise, which has immensely helped me de-stress. And so I exercise every morning early, because that's when I can. And so that helps me tons. I also, I am a yoga trainer, so I am a certified yoga instructor, and I learned how to meditate through yoga. So a lot of times, you know, I meditate, or just, you know, always try to keep a positive mindset, because it's very easy to go negative when you're trying to get something off the ground and people aren't, you know, coming to you, or, you know, it's hard. So I would say that to stay, and then, you know, you have bad days and good days, so just to always think positive, and to think positive, we have to be healthy, and just trying to exercise and eat well, and because when you're not happy, you can eat a lot of cakes, and that's not a good thing. So keep your health happy and healthy, and even if you don't, you know, sometimes you don't relate that, but it does give you that energy to keep a positive mindset. I know you had a question back there.
Actually, sure, you had actually asked the question. It was the same one.
Yeah, those little secrets: meditation, exercise, and try as much as you can to drink a lot of water and keep healthy.
So when you were growing up, with all of your travel, how do you think the different cultures that you experienced all throughout your childhood kind of shaped some of your perspectives on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, when you're younger, you don't really see the benefit to meeting different cultures and speaking a new language. I remember coming to the U.S. when I was 8, and I didn't even know what hello was. I had to go to my mother and say, "They said hello to me. What does that mean?" And she's like, "It means hola." Oh, okay, that's easy. But I learned English in 3 months, because I had to. If I wanted to make friends, I'm a very social person, and I wanted to make friends, you have to learn the language. You have no way out to do that. So that is a way, you know, when somebody comes to this country and doesn't know the language, that's very difficult for them. You know, they have to get past that. That's a very difficult progress. The second time I came, I was confident because I knew the language. It was easy for me. But I have a lot of friends that didn't have that. And so I always tell people who come to this country, it's extremely important to learn the language. I know it's hard because even I learned how to sew in Spanish. I didn't learn how to sew in English. And the terms are completely different. So now I'm relearning that whole language in English. You know, it's the same thing that people come here, they might know medical terms in a different language, but then when you come here, you're trying to figure out how to translate all those medical terms. So medical terms are difficult. Banks, the bank system is difficult. So when you see people from other countries, all those things that you know that are easy for you to understand because you've been part of that culture, it's so hard for somebody else. And there's so many changes, and it's helped me because I've been more open to it. So if I meet somebody new, I'm more open to their difference than maybe somebody else would be, because I know that I went through it, and it, it's people are like, but you speak so well, yeah, but like it was hard when I came and had to kind of learn new things and be open to those differences, and I think that's important even in the U.S. to be open to different people and different experiences. Because at P&G, that's what I loved about my job. I was working with people from all different, places and cultures and colors, and it was just, and they were all, and they all had a different point of view that helped us get to where we needed to go. And everybody was so smart, and the ideas, because of their past and where they come from, was so incredible to see that, and that's what made the teamwork really amazing, was all those different kind of melting pots coming together. Did I add?
Yes, yeah, that was a great, yeah.
So after you had finished your education, you started your career, like, I don't know if you can estimate, like, what percentage were you actually, like, learning on the job, or actually not, I guess, doing what you studied for in college?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in college, it was all fun and pretend. But like when you got to the real world, it was a whole different story, That's a really good question because, and I think that's what college kind of prepares you for. We get to do like all these different projects, and since we were doing our own research and our own stuff, we could practically make anything that we wanted, and it was very creative. But then when you went to work, and that was the great thing about industrial design, because you went one quarter you were in school, the other quarter you were working in a company, and then the other quarter you went back to school, and then the other quarter so you had work experience as you went through the career, which I think is critical, because when you go to a company, you're not the boss anymore, right? You're working with all these different people, and that's why back to that question about, for me it was easy because I already knew, and I had already been in all these different cultures and kind of knew how to move around. So when you were working in teams, I could ask questions and try to understand where they came from, and try to, meet people, so we could move the project forward. And so working in the company, you have to work with all these people, and you have to be, sometimes you don't get your own way, or you have to kind of be okay with what somebody else idea is, if it's the right thing to move forward. So you have to be open to different points of view, and then coming together and trying to figure things out. And that's the big difference between school which you're kind of doing everything by yourself and kind of having your own ideas, versus in a company structure where you have all these different people, plus then you have the big people that make decisions. And those are the people you have to convince. So being able to build the story that can then, when you pitch it to the president, they are, oh, okay, I know where you're going, this is good, moving forward, versus, no, I don't like it, start over, you know. So, you know, in a company, you have to make sure that you're more interconnected with everybody at the table to bring the idea forward. It's a big, big difference.
What advice do you have for a person planning on pursuing entrepreneurship?
So I would say that that's a really good question. Entrepreneurship is freedom. I mean, I don't want to go back to corporate. I'm hoping that, you know, this thing gets going so it sustains me, because I love what I do. I work with a lot of people, so, you know, corporate showed me how to work with people, you know, making sure that I take in the advice that others have. I'd say make sure that you understand all the parts of your business. You know, I'm not great at my finances, but I know how much money I have, and I know enough to defend myself. So being able to understand all the parts of the business. And I would also, you know, I always tell people this, like, and a lot of people who I know do this, they have a second job to sustain their entrepreneurship until they do that. You know, I'm kind of, my husband right now is really helping me with, you know, being able to kind of put this off the ground. But I try to do, if I have a little thing that, a consulting gig, I'll do it just to sustain a little bit of the business piece. So I would just say, you know, make sure you have all the pieces and you understand all those pieces fully. Like, if you're not great at the graphic stuff, but understand, you know, what you want and how you want it. Building, you know, the brand, the finances, you know, and everything else that you have to do, and talk to people. I mean, I have a full calendar. I don't know how, to be honest, but I'm in meetings all day long, and I do that because I want to learn from other people. I want to help other people, so I'm always in the place of either helping or being helped, and trying to form all the, you know, the social media, trying to run that, trying to get myself scheduled for things. You know, I have an event, so I have to plan for that event. So I would just, you know, be open, understand all the parts of your business, and be open to feedback, because a lot of times what I've seen is sometimes you're not really open to feedback, and then you're moving in a direction, and then you have to come back and move it another way, just because you didn't want to hear what somebody else had to say, or you weren't even open to it. So I see a lot of entrepreneurs that are not open to feedback, and I take feedback. You know, I'll listen, and I'll be like, oh, okay, I see what they're saying. Sometimes I take it, sometimes I don't. It just depends on if I can make that change, or if it's really relevant to my business, and really understanding what my business is, what my mission is, and always going back to that. Like, am I true to my mission? You know, if somebody gives me an idea, or say, okay, I hear you, but my mission is this. Is that still relevant? And see what they have to say too. So that's the, and it's a lot of work, but when you love what you do, it doesn't really matter. Yeah.
Was starting a business something you had thought you might pursue earlier on in life, or was it an idea born when you were living in Louisville or Cincinnati, or?
Yeah, so when you have a job that pays you really well, sometimes you don't want to leave it, but I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I had dabbled on a few things to see, oh, maybe I can do this and then leave the company, right? I always tried to dabble, the ideas that I had at the time weren't really good ideas because they weren't moving forward for me, you know. So I did dabble and I sustained it because I was working, you know, and so I was able to kind of try to do these things and see how they worked, and I learned a lot from that. But yes, I always wanted to own my own business. I didn't know in what it was going to be. I wanted to be in fashion, but I thought it was, you know, I had to make my own line, but actually now I'm helping people do their line. So it's a little different piece, which I like more, that piece of teaching and helping people versus me trying to do my own thing. And eventually I will. I have tons of ideas. I want to do tons of things. But right now my mission, and that's going back to saying, make sure that I'm going back to my mission, is to help other people kind of get their products out.
I was gonna ask if you wanted me to. Do you have any other things that where you think you plan on going? That you said there were so many ideas that you.
Yeah, so, you know, because I used to teach business models in Philadelphia. I used to teach a class of business models, and so I always tell people, don't change your brand, but you can change your business model. So that's what I'm trying these different business models, and then if I don't see them moving forward, I can change it. So one of the things, you know, I like to do eventually is do kits for people. I was talking to you about that. That's just an idea I just had. So I went to some place in Alabama, and she had a really nice business, and she has these kits that she sells, and I thought, oh, that would be, but they're very complex. So I would say make it simpler for people to kind of sew, you know, just sell the kit, something nice and pretty. So I have to build all that. So that's an idea, but it takes time because I have to build the kits, right, and put them together and try to sell them. So that was one idea. The other idea, I do want to do a line of bags because I think there's still problems to be solved. And, you know, because there's sometimes I think, oh, I wish I had a bag like this, you know, that I could just put this in it, and I can't find one, or they're not very pretty, or, you know, whatever. So I want to do one, and I've had people ask me to do a few, so that's another idea, you know. So so those are like a few ideas that I have to maybe pursue later on, not right this minute, but, and yeah, so.
I have a question. So you said you moved from Cincinnati to Louisville for love.
Yes.
So obviously you left your corporate position in order to do that. Were there more, I mean, if it was just for love, that's absolutely fine as well. But were there also things, because initially I thought you moved for love, but then I'm hearing that left, like now you have freedom to pursue entrepreneurship. You have a partner who I guess can support in some ways financially. So were there other advantages besides love?
Just love. Yes, there were, I mean, so, it was time. I've been there for 13 years. I had wanted to leave for about 3 years. And so when the opportunity came up, I thought, you know, I'm gonna take it, because, you know, I've been here for too long, you know, and then you start like hating what you do a little bit, because you're like, oh, I have to go talk to this start getting into like a little bit of a, although you get to travel and, you know, see different countries and have some fun, but then also then there's that political side where you have to work and you know, out of hours of the day and talk to China very early in the morning or very late at night, and you're just working, and you don't have a life, and you're not working on what you love. You're just doing something, right, that you don't love. And so I felt like it was time to go. And I had, you know, come here a few times, and I loved this city. I was like, this is so like nice, and people were so welcoming. I mean, I know more people here than I ever did 20 years that I lived in Cincinnati, you know, because I went to school in Cincinnati, then I worked in Cincinnati, and I know more people now here than I ever did. I mean, it was just all about work at one point, and here, you know, I'm the president of Prospanica, which is a Hispanic organization, and I've met lots of people there and got to meet all these people on that side and really be integrated with the Hispanic community, and then that's made me work with the mayor and the city, and so, you know, I know a lot of people there. And then I joined another organization, which is Global Visual Arts, which I've met you know, a whole set of different people. So joining nonprofits has been immensely great for me, and even the business, because they're really supportive and you know what I'm doing. So I would always say, is there a way that as you do your business, giving back, you know, giving back in some way, and that's been the great piece here. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I love about the city and what I do here. So.
Do you find like a really big like importance to connect into like your own culture? Like you said, like you're big, like you're glad and will we connect with the Hispanic community? Is that like really important to you?
It is. I mean, I didn't think it was, but when I started being more involved and then becoming the president of the organization, people will reach out to me for questions that I don't even know how to answer, but I know somebody who can, you know, and the city just had a Welcome Academy, and I was able to represent my community and really help know a little bit more about what the city has to offer. And you know, it's not just, it's important to me to help Hispanic people, but it's also we've started to also join forces with other organizations, which has been great, you know, and then the fashion is very diverse too, you know, so just being, you know, seeing like all the different types of people that touch things, and I feel like I live in a much more diverse city than I ever did in Cincinnati. You know, in Cincinnati, although P&G was diverse, the city was not. And so it's very nice to, you know, like if I come here and like look at all you, they're all different, right? And so it's really nice to see that in the city.
Do you make a lot of your own clothes now?
No, but I started, so it was funny because I stopped, you know, sewing for a long time, and then I took this training in Alabama a week ago, and it was so much work. It was hand sewing, so it was all hand stitching, and I did like 100 hours to make this thing that I was like determined to do, and I spent, you know, like 10, I think it was, I took count like 11 days and working on it, you know, 5, 8, you know, 9 hours whenever I could. And so I went, and it was fun, and I couldn't, like, every second I had, I enjoyed, you know, doing it. So I'm hoping to get back, maybe to only doing, I don't want to do clothes again, but maybe for myself, and then doing other things, you know, like bags and stuff like that. That sizing is just really a hard thing to do. really difficult, because everybody, we're all different sizes, and to get it right is just very, very hard, so. Thank you for listening.
Alright guys, are we good with questions for today? Ms. Rodriguez, we have a gift for you.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Sweet.
We really appreciate you coming in.
Yeah.
It was really interesting to have you speak to us because I don't think that, other than my mom, we've had anyone who was born in a different country come in yet, so.
Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for
Thank
being so
you.
wonderful.
Do you have any business card or contact
I
information?
do. From my last fashion show. Oh, sorry. And I know you guys are doing websites, and I didn't do my website, but I did tell the person who was doing my website what to do. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is a really
This is a nice.
I need to make myself
Like really rich.
This is a
And
nice.
then
I am a designer, so I got.
oh, they don't want to. And then I looked over at she's born like native Chinese parents, moved to and they grew up in England. Weirdest accent.
Speak Croatian Chinese.
Yeah. It's just so funny.
Croatian is one exactly like that.
Yeah.
It freaks me out.
Yeah, it's.
Because I can't see the Croatian
So essay impressed with it. They want to have it, and they're just like, oh, wait, fuck you. And then they just-
Shall I walk you?
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
exactly the reason.
Well, I know how you go to some invitation.
Alright, let's roll out.
Okay. Sorry, I'm sorry. I'm like so sorry. I didn't
You
know
know,
where
there was something weird about us continuing to do.
No, we didn't.
I'm gonna do that.
And then the milk of another name.
No.
That's why I'm If you, I mean, I know it would be weird if you're like,
Oh, yeah, but this one is, hold on.
the first I say.
What is?
I know you did say, it was a bit
Yeah,
complicated.
without clubs. Making that after age,
Today and
you
then
know,
I should think it's
or two, whatever the case may
Whoa.
Okay, like Asia with the
Like, so I'm just spamming my phone randomly, so I get at least 3 a day. I don't know where can I
Like,
know
this
this?
makes me feel like the concept of checking those
Be careful, because you know what? I know you sure wore a white shirt. And I went to a meeting.
I don't
was
drink
talking,
more. They told my doctor
and
told me
then
I ate more
and then I
calcium.
got home and I
I
was
said,
like,
well,
That's what a supplement is. Yeah, you know, supplements like 6 days
milk
long.
juice I was drinking.
I'm not gonna-
And I hadn't seen it, and I'm sure it was in a meeting.
What'd
you say?
It's so
Things happen.
Hey, well, what about, you know what it sounds like? Exactly, that's the only milk that you should drink.
You know what it sounds like?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, so, my name is Yamilca Rodriguez, and I'm from Venezuela. I was born in Venezuela. Venezuela is at the very tip top of South America, and we speak Spanish in Venezuela, so Spanish is my first language. I lived in Venezuela till I was 8 years old, and then I moved to the U.S. My father was doing his PhD in San Diego, California, so we all moved to San Diego for 6 years while he was doing his schooling. Then we went back to Venezuela, and we were there for a year, and then we came back to the U.S. because he got a job in the U.S. for 1 year. And we went to from San Diego to Illinois, and my father's like, this is too cold. So we returned back to Venezuela, and, you know, moving back and forth. So I've been around, you know, back and forth from Venezuela to the US since I was very young. That's why the accent is not as big as other people you might hear. And then I was in Venezuela, and then I started in graphic design. I went to school for graphic design, but then I left graphic design to move to the capital because I was living in the mountains, in the Andes Mountains. Then I moved to Caracas, the capital, and went to school for industrial design, which is actually product design. And I don't know, a lot of people don't even know what product design is, but basically it's anything that's three-dimensional. So the chairs you're sitting on, the tables, the cars that you see outside, the telephones, the phones, everything that has a three-dimensionality to it is industrial design. And so what you do in industrial design is you understand the human factors. So you know, if you have average size things that can you hold it in your hand? Do you hold it in your right hand? Do you hold it in your left hand? Is there a button? I was thinking about this even on the drive here because you need feedback. We as humans want to hear feedback from the things that the product. So if I press a button, I want to hear it click. And all those little things have to be designed into the product. It's not like, oh, I make the product and it clicks. You have to design it. And sometimes you have to design a certain noise or a certain, you know, vibration. Or, you know, so it has to do a lot with the human. So we design for humans, right? You don't design for other things. So when you see a product that you don't understand, it's not very well designed. It's not your fault. We always blame ourselves, like, I don't understand how to use this. And it's just not user-friendly, is what we say. So a product should be user-friendly, should be you know, you should be able to just by clicking certain things find out. And that's why it's so important what you guys are doing here when you're doing web design is to really make it simple for the consumer and not complex, right? Take out all the complexity of it. And that's what industrial designers do. They should take out all the complexity. Sometimes it skips, so I'll explain one thing. Some companies use just engineers and then the engineers just design it and they don't have an industrial designer on board. And that's when things don't have the human factor piece. But the engineer and the industrial designer should work hand in hand together. Because the engineer does what's inside, what makes it function, and the industrial designer does everything that you see. So in a car, the engineer would do the engine and everything that you don't see, right? And all the stuff that's inside, but everything that you see, like the distance, that you grab the handlebar, where you push the button, all that is a industrial designer will be doing because they need to understand the human factors. Where is it easier, you know, is the pedal, am I reaching the pedal? You know, so that's why you have the seats that move, so you can, you know, imagine if you had a car and you couldn't reach anything. and you were like going over there, you crashed because you're trying to push a button with, you know, so that's why it's all designed very purposefully. But I went too far into that. But let me go back and tell you a little bit about how what I do today and how I got there. So when I was in Venezuela and we had moved back for the second time. Wait. Yes, the second time. We had moved back the second time. In Venezuela, you don't go, if you have a party, you don't go and buy a dress at the store. That's not the way you go purchase something. You actually have it made. And so there's a lot of seamstress, and you go to a seamstress and you have your clothes made for that party. So every time I would go to the seamstress, I would be very angry because she did not make what I had drawn on the little sketchbook. I said, this is what I want. I would draw it for her, and she would be like, okay. And then it wouldn't be what I had drawn. So I was like, what is wrong with her? She doesn't do what I asked. And my mom's like, okay, let's put you in sewing lessons so you can learn and make your own clothes. So I did. I learned from this amazing seamstress. She taught me how to make patterns, how to sew. She was very strict. When something wasn't perfect, she'd like tear it up and have you start over and say, okay, now you gotta do this over. So I learned a lot about sewing, and I loved sewing for myself until people started asking me to fix their zippers and put on buttons, and can you hem this, and can you make my curtain, and can you do my pillows? And I was like, no. I was like, and then I stopped sewing. I never told a soul I knew how to sew. I would be very quiet. I really didn't do any sewing for a long time, but still love fashion. But instead of going to fashion school, I did industrial. I started in graphic, actually. There wasn't really any fashion where I started. And then I started in graphic design, and I went to Caracas, and I saw that there was industrial design, and I decided to switch careers and go from graphic. Graphic is anything that's two-dimensional, right? So all the types and the fonts and the icons and logos that you see, those are more graphic design, anything that goes on mostly paper or something that's flat. And so I started there, and then I moved to industrial design later on, because I love that intersection between engineering and art is what I call where industrial design is. So I started I did industrial design in Venezuela, and then I had an opportunity to come to the US and finish my career. I went and did industrial design at UC. At the time, the University of Cincinnati was the #1 school of industrial design, and they did a lot of car design, which is super interesting for industrial designers to have the opportunity to understand and see how they do car design. I'll tell you, that's a whole different animal there. But that was it was really good to go through that school, because in industrial design, I don't know if you guys have heard, but there's like these maker spaces right now. These maker spaces, that was part of industrial design. You would go to the shop. We didn't call it a maker space, but we called it the shop. And the shop had all these machines, because you had to build your prototype. Do you guys know what a prototype is?
Yes.
Yeah, so we had to make something that kind of looked like what we were making, so people could see the size and touch it and feel it. And so every time we went to class, we had a project. Okay, you have to design a chair. Okay, so now I have to go make the chair. First I design it, I draw it, and then I go make it. Because if you don't make it, then you don't know if people can sit on it, and is it comfortable, is it the measurements. So we would make it at the shop. So the shop had all these different machines, and you can use all the machines at the shop. You had to learn how to use all the machines, and then you would make your products. Like I made a hair dryer and like all kinds of different things that you can make. A phone at one point. And the fun thing about industrial design is that you don't have to only make, you can design a store if you wanted to. And then I went back to the level of fashion. I designed a store that had, I wanted to focus on hemp, because hemp had been banned from a lot of states for a misperception that hemp was like marijuana. And actually, that is not true. Hemp was the original Levi's jeans was made out of hemp. Hemp is a very, very strong fabric, and you can make like paper out of hemp. You can make clothes out of hemp, and because it looks like the marijuana tree, although it doesn't act like it, that's why the states had banned it. I had done all the research to really understand this whole history of hemp, and that's what's important about even what you guys do today, is to make sure that you understand not only the history of what other people have done, but what the competition has done. because the competition is also important. And what had happened in hemp was that they were competing against the paper companies. And the paper companies had a lot of power and influence. And so they figured out a way to get hemp out of the way. And that's why hemp was banned across the different states. And now in Kentucky, we can grow hemp. Right now, Hawaii can grow hemp. So now there's a lot of states that are trying to start to grow that because they know that the fiber is super strong and it has a lot of performance measures. So anyway, let's move on to the story. After I graduated from UC, I went to work at Procter & Gamble. I don't know if you guys know, have you heard of Procter & Gamble? They make like Crest, if you've ever used Crest, Bounty, paper towels, Always, and Tampax is their brand. They make, well, we don't own any of the makeup anymore. We sold that. Also, all CoverGirl used to be P&G, but Olay, if you know Olay brands, the skincare brand, that was P&G. So P&G, and then hair care, Pantene. So they have a lot of brands. And so when I started at P&G, I was working on innovation. So innovation is just what's the future of this brand, and what are you going to make 10, 20 years from now? So we would look at the far out to then be able to produce those products to hit the time frames, because at P&G everything's very slow. So we had to really look far out to be able to start executing what we needed to do. So that was such a fun job. I got to travel the world and talk to different consumers about skincare. So, you know, you would go to Japan and ask consumers, you know, tell me your routine. And they'd bring out like 20 products. I'm not kidding you, 20 products. And they said, this is, you know, I use these 10 in the morning, and then I use these 10 in the evening. They had Japan and Korea are huge into skincare. We're not so much in the US. You know, we wash our face and then maybe we use a moisturizer and that's it, maybe 2 products. And sometimes we don't do it in the morning and at night, we just do it in the morning. So there's, you know, we're not as driven in the skincare as Japan and Korea are. But it was very interesting because you had to understand what the out there brands were doing, so then you can come back and see how you wanted to drive your brand and what are the products you wanted to deliver. Because we didn't only deliver products in the US, although we were in the US and our headquarters were in the US, but we were doing products for China, Japan, Korea, Latin America, Europe, you know, and every country is different. So although we led the project from here, we had to understand and travel and talk to the different consumers and understand their needs. So then when we would launch in Japan, we would talk about the product a little bit differently than we would talk about the product in Brazil, for example, or in the UK. You know, we had to use different language that made sense to the consumer. So that's why we would go to these countries and do research, was to really understand what were the benefits that the consumer wanted and what were they going to take away from it. So that was the critical piece. So I did innovation for 10 years. I did devices for the skin, products for the skin, lots of bottles, and just a lot of strategy work, like how do we get here, how do we go from here, how to do this. So just thinking a little bit further out, and then how do we map out the strategy to get to where we need to go. And I think you guys, you know, just building websites, it's a similar train of thought, because you have to think, what does this person want and how do we get there, right? You can't just start designing something and then all of a sudden, oh, sorry, that's not what I wanted. Oh, then you have to start over, right? So it's like, what does this person want, and try to map that out, and then you make a process to deliver on that endpoint. So that's kind of what we did, a similar, that's what we did for our products. And so I got to facilitate, because I was in design and I was a designer, and we had different processes to go about things. We weren't as linear as, somebody in finance would be, or somebody in engineering would be. We kind of did things in different maps, and because we looked at things more visual, we wanted to bring a little bit of that visual with the words, and so what I used to do, I used to facilitate a lot of sessions that we would call them design thinking, which is creative problem solving, which is basically now everybody's kind of taking it over. You do things, and you do post-it notes, and you write, and then you have paper plates, and you kind of make a model out of it, and you show it. So you start to understand, and the whole team starts to understand where people's heads are. And that's another way, I did a training a year back, where we were trying to map a system, like a website system. And so we'd show each page, like we'd sketch it out. So this is a computer. So it was amazing how they did this. I thought it was genius. So they would show the computer, and they would have like, they put a square for this one, a square for whatever, about, let's say it was about product shop or something. And so if I clicked on, it was a piece of paper. If I clicked on shop, then they would take the paper off and put a new paper that would contain all the, and then I said, okay, then I would click here. And that's a good way to understand without building like all this stuff, and then you're like, oh, I missed it, they don't understand this. So it's a good way to get feedback from the consumer on the product that you're building. So that's what we used to do. We used to do these brainstorms to solve a problem. So when we had a problem we were trying to solve, whether it was a product, it didn't necessarily have to be a product, it could be like a strategy. Was the strategy incorrect, or some, it could be anything that you wanted to solve, but you would state it, you write it down. Okay, this is the problem. So how do we go solve for this problem? So the first thing that we did was understand the consumer. So who is this product for? And understand them, and do like a inspirational consumer, like build her. Like, what does she, where does she eat? Where does she go shopping? What car does she drive? Does she drive a car? What model is it? What magazines does she read? Where does she go get her information? On the internet, or does she read books? You have to understand kind of their profile to build a product against them. You always, and that's what we learned in industrial design, right? You're always building the product for a person, not an animal or not an invisible person. So you have to understand who that person is, and it's really good to write out all the things, so when you go and design your product, you can say, is Susan, who's 24, gonna like that product? So, that was a good way to measure. So we'd start there, then after you understand the consumer, you write out the problem statement, and you do some very fast prototyping with cups and paper plates, and you kind of prototype your idea, and you would share it, because that's something you can tear up and rebuild, and it's a quick, rapid way to solve problems and then get to the final endpoint faster. So I did that for a long time, and it was great because I learned so much about teams and how to work teams, and a lot of times the teams didn't even know that what they were working on until they did that session, and then they would all be like, oh, like they would all be in the same page. It was just a way to get the team kind of together and the person that they were building it for. So that was huge learning, and I got to travel the world doing that as well. I did a few sessions in China and Japan, and in Brazil, and in the US. So that was part of my consumer experience. So I left P&G about 3 years ago now, and I fell in love with somebody here in Louisville. I was living in Cincinnati, and he asked me to marry him,